so many uses. The flowering stem is for fire lighting. Believe it or not, inside the head of the grass tree there is, thank you very much, an emergency food source. If we were all lost out in the bush and we needed something to eat, if you've got a grass tree in sight, none of you will starve. Because if you had to, in case of emergency, remove all the green fronds from the top of the grass tree, you'd be left with like a bald head. Inside the head of that plant, there is a large mass of pure white pulp. It is edible and it tastes a bit like coconut. It's one of the finer tasting bush foods in Australia. But in the very, very centre of the head of that plant, in amongst the white pulp, in the very centre, there's a small ball of yellow pulp, which is a great medicine. It tastes very sweet like caramel, very pleasant to eat, but it's the ultimate detox. The worst thing that could ever happen to any of us out in the Australian bush was to be bitten by a venomous snake. The toxin in your body would have to be dealt with by your pancreas, your kidneys, your liver, all working together and over time to get rid of this toxin. Some snakes, like a dugite, get bitten by one of them, your organs are more than capable of dealing with that toxin. You might get knocked around a bit, you might be a bit uncomfortable, but you would survive a dugite bite with just your organs. If you got bitten by a tiger snake though, your pancreas, your kidneys, your liver would work overtime to get rid of this toxin, but 9 times out of 10, the toxin is too great. Your organs will shut down. Ultimately, you will die from the tiger snake bite without a hospital. Back in the olden days, there were no hospitals. The only thing that would save your life was somebody telling one of the elders, this person had been bitten by that tiger snake. The elder would immediately instruct a couple of the young, fit men to dismantle that plant as quickly as possible and feed the person who was bitten that central yellow pulp. Something within it will not allow their liver to fail. It is the ultimate detox, but bear in mind, Aboriginal people's health back then was a little bit better than most today because the diet was absolutely flawless. Your body could deal with a little bit more within reason, but don't get me wrong, in and out of extreme internal pain, in and out of consciousness even, but you may survive a tiger snake bite by eating that. It is a great tip though, because if we're ever out in the bush and a guest of mine was hit by a tiger snake, I know that even if it took 3 hours to get back to the hospital and 1 hour was fixing our bus, at least if we could feed the person that and we know that we'd get them back to the hospital alive. So that's a very, very good survival tip. The grass tree itself also is shaped like an umbrella. If you're out in the bush and you have no dry firewood when it's raining, in case of emergency again, move the green fronds out the way. The dead fronds under the plant, even in the pouring rain, are bone dry. Set the whole plant alight if you have to. The whole plant will throw a heat radius of up to 10 metres. You could stand a whole busload of people around a burning grass tree. You could keep warm. You could stack your wet firewood around the base of that plant and dry that out to keep your fire going. But everybody knows the black trunk from the grass tree? These ones have not been burnt in a very long time, so they have grass scrap all the way to the bottom. But if they had been burnt, to show their appreciation, they like fire to regenerate, they'll put out a brand new flowering stem. But out of the trunk of that plant oozes a resin. The resin itself is turned into a bush glue. Here's an example of that glue holding 2 stones onto a wooden handle. But the resin from the grass tree on its own, when crushed into a powder, it's very brittle. Melt it, it turns into a hot sticky liquid. When it cools down, it sets solid, but it's very brittle, like glass. So the old people realised to make that resin into a glue, we need to add some other ingredients. One, a fibre. As disgusting as it sounds, dried kangaroo droppings was the best fibre to use. Dried, but it's a fibre element. Charcoal is added to this mixture as well, and if we went with the ratio of 50% grass tree resin crushed, 25% fibre and 25% charcoal, we would end up with a very strong bonding glue once we melt that all together and we let it cool down. It's the resin-based glue with fibre making it stronger. You're looking at the oldest form of fiberglass ever invented by people, all from natural ingredients that won't harm you, like the fiberglass today. Made in a very similar way is this item called the darb, which is a serrated edge knife. This was actually specifically made for whales. We always see whales beach themselves on the television. Science cannot tell us why. The old people believe it's a spiritual reason, not a scientific one. And like the story I told you earlier of those spirit children in the land, the old people still say today, if a child is born here, it doesn't matter where their parents come from, if they're born on this land, their spirit comes from the land. But out under that ocean, as the sea level's been rising over the ice ages, the old people say there are many spirit children trapped under that ocean now that can no longer be born into people. So they're born into our closest friends of the sea, the whale or the dolphin. Everybody knows dolphins are very human-like creatures. We say they're born like that because they have a spirit meant for a person. The whale is no different. The whale goes on a journey around the ocean. Maybe 80 or 90 years later it does a very strange thing. It swims onto the beach and it wishes to die. The old men made that knife with the shark's teeth. Those ones aren't quite intact as they should be, but if you were to cut the whale carcass open, the old man would then take some of the blood from that animal and wash it in the nearest fresh water. He would speak words in the language to release the spirit back into the land. And once that was done, and the women said, yes, that spirit has gone, the local tribe would gather. They'd eat the whale, and nothing was wasted. A perfect cycle once existed. These days it's very sad to see when hundreds of whales beach themselves all at once. But as many times as we try and push them back out to sea, they always turn around, come back in again. It's a hard concept for us to understand. Whales beaching themselves for a spiritual reason. But there's a very similar story out of Africa that's well documented. The story of the elephant's graveyard. Why do all the African elephants, when they get to a certain age, go to a certain place to die? Science can't figure that one out either. But like the stories here, people in Africa have their ancient stories as well. Some things are almost unexplainable.